It's the culmination of this grand story that we've all been a part of that started in the beautiful mind of George R. R. Martin. One of the things that Dan and I hoped to accomplish with this series was the sense of a story with a real beginning, middle, and an end. For that to work, the final season has to feel like it was where it all came together, or it all fell apart.
We kind of built out characters and storylines, and now everything is coming together.
Having tied all the knots, it's such a beautiful episode and wonderfully written and directed by the two men that created this madness themselves.
Often the best stories are the ones that are both completely surprising in the moment and then in hindsight have an air of inevitability.
In terms of the final episode, even just thinking about, where these characters end up, which of them survive, which of them die, that's something we've been talking about right from the get-go. And I think it was around season 3 when it all started to make sense to us exactly where it was going.
The end of an era, it's the end of a story. I think it was very important for them that they directed the last episode.
We've known that we wanted to direct the final episode since probably season 3 when we directed our first episode and really enjoyed the experience.
Our favorite part of working with them is that they listen to everybody and they listen to ideas. They might not always accept them, but their door is always open.
I just don't think they could give that episode to anyone else. I'm sure they've sort of been dreaming about the way the shots should look.
We've been working with these actors for so long now. We've been working with the great Jonathan Freeman, our DP, for so long, and our incredible editor, Katie. We just have a team around us that we really trust, and we have a real shorthand with them. And the final hour or so, we just wanted to be the ones doing it.
Dan and David are such great collaborators, and they're very clear at what they want, and they're very clear what they don't want. So the process working with them was not only a delight, but very easy.
We knew episode 6 couldn't just pick up visually where episode 5 left off. And I think from the very beginning, we knew that a very large part of episode 6 in the beginning especially was going to be not about what was being seen, but about the person who was seeing it and what it was doing to him as seen largely in shots that stay very close on Peter's face.
He starts this journey and he knows what he's going to find. And that's his brother and sister. And that's sort of what really leads him to cut ties with Daenerys, because it didn't have to happen.
He then goes back to the Red Keep, and then the final consummation, of course, is when he gets downstairs and he finds his brother and sister dead.
We ended up using these, I won't even call them dummies because they're so well done, that Lena and Nikolai came to set ready to lie down and be dead, but these dummies were so much better at being dead than they were.
Even though the intention had always been just to use the dummies for part of it and the actual actors for the rest of it, we ended up using the prosthetics the entire time.
I think it gave Peter something a bit more real because those dummies were dead. They were motionless. And if Nikolai's sitting there covered with soot, Peter's trying to get himself to a place that Tyrion would be. And then 3 seconds after he's done, Nikolai's coughing and laughing and blinking, and it would be the spell would get broken over and over again. We realized that having to reset every time was going to be working against the grain of what he needed to accomplish in that scene.
The storyline, episode 6, a lot of it takes place in places that are visually effects enhanced. So the director of photography, Jonathan Freeman, had to work hard at working out the best way to shoot things and then construct what minimal bits of set we could afford to make.
The Clouds of Speech scene was almost entirely a virtual set. What was interesting is that our production designer, Deb Riley, decided this year she would like to introduce a tool that we had not used before called VR, virtual reality, but it's applied to filmmaking.
We had a concept that Kieran Belshaw had drawn and created, and Dan and David had signed off on. And so the next step was to try and work out exactly how big our build would need to be in order to replicate the kind of height and drama that Kieran had in that concept. Jonathan and I took it into virtual reality then, and to Jonathan's credit, he worked incredibly hard to try and figure out just how high that staircase needed to be, just how far his camera needed to be away in order to create those shots.
We greened one of the big stages, put the one section of stairs in, and they were able to shoot all of the coverage there, and secondarily in front of the exterior King's Landing gate for the Unsullied, the troops on the ground, and then Jon walking through.
A lot of that speech, we were trying to put a lot of movement in, and not sort of straight movement, circular movement. So we put up sort of a lot of circular rails up there, and also used a very small telescopic crane to be able to work on top of the steps, because it's tricky. There's a lot of VFX work around you there, trying to imagine what's in the background.
Dany has been above it all, literally, throughout this entire battle. She's fought the whole thing from the air. So when she's in the plaza, all she's seeing is her own armies triumphant in the city that she came to conquer for all the best reasons. And I think the idea of spreading her brand of revolution around the entire world is a very attractive idea to her at this moment. In her mind, it's a very ethical idea because she's not seeing the cost the way Jon and the way Tyrion have seen the cost.
I knew that speech was going to be really important, and I spent a huge amount of time learning it. And for the first time in my whole Game of Thrones career, I got that word perfect. I'm being so brutally honest here, I was in hell learning that speech. This pretend language was literally eating me up. I couldn't do it. And then magic happened. I woke up in the morning, went on, and it all came out. I was probably fighting, not what I was saying, but it was what Dany was doing.
What's interesting about it is that she's been making similar kinds of speeches for a long time, and we've always been rooting for her. And this is kind of the natural outcome of that philosophy and that willingness to go forth and conquer all your enemies. And it's just not quite as fun anymore.
In some ways, Cersei beats her, I think, in a strange way, because Cersei twists her into a bad person.
I think the final scene between Jon and Daenerys is something we came up with sometime in the midst of the third season of the show. The broad strokes of it, anyway. But there was a tremendous amount of pressure to get it right, because we know that this is not a scene that's giving people what they want.
We got there and was just kind of like, oh my God, this is gonna be so emotional. And then it was realizing that we actually had to do so much work to get all those shots that we needed.
At the beginning of the scene, Dany enters, and the wonderment of her coming into this space was reminiscent of the scene that we shot in season 2, the dream sequence. Dan and David wanted to echo that scene. There's a fine balance because we care about the two characters in the throne room, Dany and Jon, so it's hard to find a point of view. And in some ways, we didn't want to really force a point of view. So it was important that we allowed that each character had their moments.
Please, Dany.
Can't hide behind small mercies.
There's this discussion through the whole show of whether or not Daenerys is like her father, who was insane. Throughout the whole conversation they have, she really maintains like a reasonable approach to the thing that she's done. And there are only a few places where something peeks out that tells him what's really coming.
What about everyone else?
They don't get to choose.
He doesn't know he's going to betray her until right at the end. And at that point in Jon's head, it's a number of things. It's number one, you don't factor in anyone else's decision. And also, that means you're going to kill my sisters. So it becomes family versus her. And that's ultimately why Jon does what he does.
Didn't see it coming. Final scene, I did not see that coming. So it was brilliantly written because it reads the way that it hopefully will play, which is, what? After all of everything that she'd done in the season, I almost felt relieved.
To destroy the throne room was something that terrified me, actually, and it's something that we did quite early on. And I also was quite concerned about that because I didn't feel that I'd learned the lessons of the rubble and the destruction at that point. So it nearly killed me, and I was really still trying to work out exactly what it should look like as we were going. Because it's very difficult to concept and very difficult to predict just how much rubble you would need. Certainly the thing that I've learned is these sets are very, very hungry. No matter how much you put in there, you can always use more.
It's not easy to create rubble that looks good. It can quite easily look very still and fake, and the shapes we had to create in order to give it not just a visual interest, but also an impact, that was really difficult.
David and Dan had spoken about the images of Coventry Cathedral that had been bombed during the Blitz, and the beautiful image about that and the tragedy of that image is just that the facade is standing there. There's no roof left. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and I think that that's precisely what we were trying to do with the throne room, was to create a very moving space, a space that also felt quite poetic in a sense. It was something that Jonathan and I looked at in virtual reality very carefully. He was very clear about what areas needed to be real, what areas needed to remain of that set, and how much visual effects would have to take over.
Drogon shows up, but it's tricky that when he comes in, he doesn't steal the show. We had to animate him in such a way that he's always second fiddle to what the actors are doing until he does this huge roar and then blasts the throne.
The big question in people's minds seemed to be who was going to end up on the Iron Throne. One of the things we decided about the same time we decided what would happen in the scene is that the throne would not survive. That the thing that everybody wanted, the thing that caused everybody to be so horrible to everybody else over the course of the past 8 seasons was going to melt away. Then, of course, what it looked like became very important.
Gavin having built the original throne, it was very fitting that he also sculpt the melted version.
There had to be quite a big R&D session, really, to get the final thing, because this was a big piece of work, the climax to the whole season. So there was an enormous amount of pressure on us to make it look right. The closest thing we got was actually just finding burnt-out cars. The alloy wheels were actually sort of running, to get that kind of metallic look to it, but also its behavior. We built a model on a much smaller scale before we then went full size into the sculpture. Once it was sculpted, we then had to mold it all, which was a very difficult process, and then cast it all out. You then work very closely with the special effects department. They took one of our molds of the centerpiece of the throne, and they were having to sort of get lighting elements in there. And then obviously visual effects are kind of working all of the magical side of things, of actually seeing it melted in various stages.
We developed a whole bunch of shots, which is a combination of practical fire and then digital melting. For the throne room scene, we just threw the absolute cutting edge of technology at it. And when you do that, you free up the camera people to do what they do. They're even less constricted.
And there's a lot of new technology we were using, a system called NCAM, which allows the operator and on the screen to see what is out there on the green screen. So it sort of marries the world you see with the imagined world, but you actually get to see it in the camera.
NCAM was fantastic. It made the process a whole lot easier for everybody, for the actors, for the cameramen. You're watching the scene take place with Drogon right there.
We had to use wire work and the pole arm to pick her up. When Drogon picks her up and flies away,
We did that all on wires.
The dragon flying away with Dany's lifeless bodies, that's the climax of the show. What we didn't really realize was how much residual drama there was left. Once we realized that both Jon and Tyrion were inevitably going to be prisoners, we knew that their fate was far from settled. So we went through a number of different versions of how to best take advantage of that tension, and we finally landed on the version we had in the Dragon Pit. It's a rare opportunity on a show like this to get everyone, or at least large numbers of your main cast together in the same place. It was great to go back there.
We shot at Italica, which is a coliseum that we shot in last year. It's what they call the Dragon Pit, which is where the Targaryens used to keep their dragons thousands of years ago. And it just seemed to be a good focal point to have a central meeting.
They wanted to be a little less power structured in the sense that they preferred almost a semicircle so that no one ever really had the head seat of the table, if you will.
Jonathan had some fantastic plans for, how we would shoot the day. A lot of the end result is that the audience will see it as though it was shot in the last knockings of the daylight. During the day, we'd shoot a lot of the actors and try and sort of shade them a little bit. But when you see anything wide, all those shots were done right at the last moment of the day. So it would look like an evening scene.
Jon committed his crime here. His fate is for our king to decide. Or our queen.
We don't have a king or queen.
You're the most powerful people in Westeros. Choose one.
It's a momentous moment where we kind of decide who will be the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and kind of where everyone will go.
I suppose you want the crown?
Me? Can't think of a worse choice.
Who then?
Around season 3, we went to visit George R.R. Martin, and he writes and he kind of figures things out as he's writing. When we went to visit him back then, and this was while he was still writing book 5, he didn't know yet where the story was going, and he knew a few key things, and one of those key things was that the final king at the end of the story would be Bran.
All hail Bran the Broken, first of his name, king of the Andals and the first men, lord of the 6 kingdoms, and protector of the realm.
All hail Bran the Broken!
I wasn't surprised by Bran. Bran is the only probably pure person in there. And the idea that he cannot father children is the real key for Tyrion's reason, because they have repeated the cycle in this Westerosian history of heirs being really bad.
When Tyrion does suggest that he should be king, there's no real surprise with Bran, and then there's a great line where he gets to go, "Why do you think I came all this way?" Which I don't even think is just a reference to coming all the way down to King's Landing. It's the fact that why do you think this character has had this journey, going from someone who has everything taken away from them, who has to go on this wild journey over many years. And now he finds himself all-knowing and king of the now 6 kingdoms.
Lord Tyrion, you will be my hand.
We knew that's where we wanted Tyrion to end up, back where he started in that chair to try to, I think as Bran says in the scene about, he's made lots and lots of mistakes over the past several years, and now he's going to spend the rest of his life fixing them. And we thought that it would be a really fun group of people to have him making those repairs with.
What I love about it is life goes on. There's not this end, and you sort of leave them to their business.
What's this?
A song of ice and fire. Archmaester Ebro's history of the wars following the death of King Robert. I helped him with the title.
Dan and David had always had imagined a shot at the very end, tracking back over the destroyed King's Landing map, cleaned up, but the destruction is there, so there's still work to be done, basically.
It's a very, very satisfying ending because it suggests there's going to be a way forward that is completely different. And again, hopefully, will be much better for all the people involved because their voices will be heard.
I think in a way it's a very cool victory for the Starks. Sansa gets to be Queen of the North, Bran runs the rest of the place, and Jon Snow gets to stay alive, which is a victory of sorts considering his predicament. And Arya is basically going off to explore the new lands west of Westeros.
We knew that those final minutes of the show is what people will walk away from the last episode of the show with. The fact that there was no dialogue to fall back on, that there was only the images of these people that we were going to see for the last time, we knew there was a lot of weight on those moments for us.
We started the show with these characters. I mean, we had the initial cold open where you were beyond the wall and you saw the Rangers and everything, but we basically started at Winterfell with the Starks. So we were always thinking back to those first shots. You know, we've been with that family for so long and we wanted to see what happened to them, really.
We wanted to thread the three storylines together, even though they're going their separate ways. So it felt natural to not only tell it as montage, but to actually design shots that would be similar, feeling even though they're going separate ways, they're still connected.
I can't really describe the moment that I read the final scene. I think it was just so overwhelming, and I kind of kept reading and rereading, and I felt a bit numb afterwards because I never thought I would be reading the final scene.
David and Dan wrote me in to dress it, which is great because it's a costume that I love. It's a lot of armor, a lot of embroidery and printing and dyeing, and it's quite special.
It's very gratifying. It's great that, you know, she ends up being Queen in the North, and I think it's the place where she really feels like she belongs, and I think it's a really just, happy, good ending for her, which I was never expecting on Thrones.
There was things that I wanted for her, and there's things that I didn't want for her. But overall, I think it makes sense. My whole arc this season was not about revenge, which is what my arc has always been about. In fact, it was the polar opposite, and actually deciding that that's not the life that she wants to live anymore.
I was incredibly honoured and proud to be how Thrones ends.
For the final sequence, Dan and David felt it was important to echo some of the imagery on the first episode of the first season. We used the frame that was set in the first episode and tried to recreate it somewhat with Jon and Tormund this time.
David and Dan were very intent on having the last shot mirror the first shot. It is a nice way to kind of echo the beginning while also reminding everyone of how much has changed. Instead of some Night's Watch people going out to investigate the wildlings or to harass more wildlings, it's Jon leading the wildlings out into their new home.
You're very aware of shooting the actual final shot of the show. Every inch of the frame you're so fixated on because you want it to all be completely right. So we spent a lot of time, and those people walked into and out of that forest all day.
When you do a take over and over again, everyone gets a bit bored and everyone's kind of going, have we got it yet? But with that shot, everyone wanted to just get it better and better each time. I'm pretty sure we all together watched one of our hero takes and said, well, that's it, that's the last shot of the show. And just looking at David and Dan's faces, kind of going, wow, this is it. They've done it.
Yes, that's the one.
It was a fun day because we had a lot of kids there. You know, the wildlings brought their children south of the wall. So in order to get all those kids, we had the crew members bring a lot of their little kids and get dressed up in costumes, including my kids and Dan's kids. And it felt appropriate for the last shots that it was such a family thing.
Saying goodbye to something that had become such a feature of your life and such a fixture in your life. And the people that we worked with and the people that we'd spent the time with kind of became a second family for us.
It's like an honest truth that our huge cast, they're all people that we genuinely love.
All
Oh, I know what I'm going to miss the most. I'm going to miss my colleagues. It's the people. It's always the people.
I'm gonna miss David and Dan being on set every day, who have become like older brothers to me. I'm gonna miss people like Sean Savage on camera, or like Sam Donaghy-Bell, who's a focus puller. Like all of the people that, you know, people watching this won't know, but it's like, it's a family.
You know, it's been such a journey. It'll represent the most extraordinary 8 years of my career.
I'll miss the people, I'll miss the team. You know, there's a lot of banter, a lot of chat. Even when there's tough times, you know, there's a lot of humor, a sense of humor. Not just my own team, all the teams get on great.
It's very rare that you get to kind of, you know, hook up each sort of season with a group of people who, you know, you get on with, and everyone's on the same wavelength. You know, everyone has the same kind of goal. I think that's probably the biggest thing I'll miss.
I mean, I've learned everything from this show, and I've learned everything from the people who I've met on this show. I've just had the best time. I've had the best adolescence that anyone could ever ask for. And I have been allowed to grow as a person and as an actor. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful.
I miss the camaraderie of everyone on set. I haven't experienced it before. I don't think I ever will again.
I'll miss everything. It's been the greatest. Not only with the quality of work, but the caliber of the people. I fell in love with this place, fell in love with these people, and in some respects, I think it's a little likewise, so that's a good thing too.
This was so nice to come to every year. I look forward to coming back here to Belfast and seeing my family again, my Game of Thrones family. And I mean that sincerely. I know that's something somebody usually says on one of these things, but it's really true in this case. It's our life more than our job.
What I realized the other day is that the show has given me more than just a job. It's literally given me a family. It's given me an identity that I didn't have. And I didn't ever think I would be able to play someone like this. And so she's been such a savior for me in so many ways. And I literally have David and Dan to thank for hiring me. I have the most hardworking crew. I keep saying it, but I mean it so much. They literally work harder than anyone. And the fans have, like, you know, they've given me a platform and given me hope. Thank you to all the people I don't know. Like, it's amazing.
Knowing that you're in a wonderful gig and knowing that it's coming back again, I'll miss.
I feel so honoured to have played this part of Brienne of Tarth. I've loved this character. I've loved everything that's unconventional about her. And I think the way that people have taken her to their hearts in a way that I've really felt from people has been so wonderful, because it's the idea of acceptance, and it's the idea of people embracing difference. And that is very significant to me. I'm incredibly grateful for the support. Oh dear, oh no. It had to happen. I didn't want it to.
I think the fans of the show have been a great part of this as well.
Got to say thank you to the fans, because, you know, they've kept this going. They've made it as big as it is.
To David and Dan and the fans, I'd say thank you so much for trusting me with this character and giving me the best working experience I think I'll ever have in my life, and making every day feel like a collaboration.
I'm so grateful to have had Game of Thrones in my life. It's been, you know, such a whirlwind.
Game of Thrones has changed my life. What an extraordinary journey to be a part of, to be put into this landscape and to create what we've created is a real honour.
It's been a completely thrilling experience, not repeatable, and I don't really want to repeat it. I've just done it, and I'm happy to walk away and love it.
I hope everybody will find in their next project something they can bring from this experience. So for me, the hope is that I'm going to leave Belfast, I'm going to leave this show very proud of what we've accomplished, but very excited about what comes next.
It's been a real mixture of emotions this year. I think people are quite excited to go and do new things, and also to have been part of this beloved show is an amazing feeling. And also, you know, sadness because it's over.
I'm being very fortunate to end up here, and sometimes I don't really know how that happened. I'm just really grateful, particularly to Bernie, for giving me the job in the first place.
I think we're forever indebted to David and Dan for changing our lives and making them better and certainly more interesting than maybe a lot ever imagined. And I will forever be indebted to them. Amazing, outstanding, best crew that anybody could ever wish for working their hardest, for improving. You know, they did things that I don't think any of us imagined we could do. We all kept improving and stepping up to the plate and hitting home runs year after year after year. And I'll be forever grateful to each and every one of them.
It was a world that had a tremendous amount of love and humanity in it, and it was this group of people that was really, truly international, who came together from all over the world to one purpose, to one end.
It was the ride of a lifetime. You know, we just had so much fun over so many years and made so many good friends and got to tell the story, the likes of which I don't think we'll ever have a chance to do again. It's been my great honor.
Thank you and good night.
This is humanity's last stand against the death that has come for them.
The idea of doing anything that was 45-minute non-stop battle to me was terrifying, because battle fatigue. We couldn't just have a battle. We had to follow the characters through the story.
Anyone will tell you that was the hardest episode of TV anyone in this show has done.
We had 11 weeks of night shooting. That was quite a feat for any crew to go through, because you literally become vampires.
I mean, we must have broken records in some way, even just broken, like, human working records.
I said to my guys, you know, you might not want to do it again, but you won't regret doing it the first time.
It's a real testament to the entire Belfast crew, who gave us something that no amount of money could ever buy.
We've been building towards this for so long now. You think back to the very beginning of the very first episode, and it's Beyond the Wall, where the White Walkers are stalking a group of Rangers. This is the culmination of one of the key storylines in the whole show.
We sat in the writer's room with a massive diagram of Winterfell. It was like a football locker room. We had a white marker, and we went through saying, foes here, foes move there, what defense would you have here? And we kind of just worked out the strategy.
We need to break up where we're shooting and what it looks like, so that we feel marked differences between the different locations, even though it's all essentially happening in Winterfell.
We've never been in anything but a pretty small fraction of Winterfell. We knew that, especially for episode 803, we were gonna need a lot more Winterfell than we've ever had before, because the entire episode takes place in Winterfell, and you have 19 or 20 principal characters all involved in a very chaotic situation. Deb knew she needed to at least double the size of Winterfell.
We needed to create a different gate. We needed to feel like, as the script dictated, that Winterfell was surrounded.
The main consideration for Winterfell was just to make it much more visual, to fill the frame better.
This has been not the case with the entire series. It has grown from this kind of small event into this massive thing that is reflected in the story.
You can't expect the set to look the way it's necessarily described in the script. There's a certain amount you have to fill in with your imagination. They filled it all in for us.
In David Nutter's words, he was, in the early episodes, building Winterfell up so Miguel could knock it down. And the thing that was really important to us was working out how Winterfell would close itself down. What steps would the residents of Winterfell take in order to protect themselves against the army of the dead? One of the things that was hit upon quite early was dragonglass, and how would the residents use dragonglass in order to protect themselves.
The living do have some time to prepare for this battle, and one of the things they know going into it is that they're going to be outnumbered, and another thing they know is that the whites don't like fire and dragon glass, so they're trying to use those weapons as best they can. It's lining the walls in the way that you might see a security wall topped with broken glass in our world. It's also in the courtyard in case the walls do get breached to try to prevent the whites from completely flooding.
They'd done all that they could with dragon glass, but nothing they would do would ever be enough.
We knew this episode was going to be almost entirely battle. That can get really boring really quickly if you're not careful. Part of what we cared about a lot here was getting Miguel on board.
I think that we went to Miguel because Miguel had had some of the most challenging battle sequences, and he had done them brilliantly. He was going to set himself the challenge of not repeating himself, a way of looking at the action sequences that would distinguish them from the other sequences and actually bring out something in the drama.
One of the ways we could keep this being interesting is not make it a battle per se. The way that you would normally imagine a battle. It usually has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. We know we need that, but what we also were trying to do was to give each act a genre.
It's kind of a cross between action set pieces and horror movie.
Fairly early on, I had a good idea of what I wanted it to be, because obviously the tricky thing with Ep 3 is it's all at night time. And we kind of developed the idea of, you know, playing a lot in darkness, seeing less and hearing and feeling more than necessarily seeing it.
And this is just my own personal feeling. I didn't find the whites scary anymore. They're the monster, so in a way you need them to be scary, and we need them to not just be zombies, and we need them to feel like they're something other. From that emerged this idea, firstly, of what if we don't see them until they actually are right in front of us? The only way we could think to do that is I thought of the horror movie convention of if you're in a haunted house in the middle of nowhere and the only light that emanates from that field is that house itself and everything else drops into darkness, it makes what would by day be just another meadow or town or whatever it is, it gives it an ominous feeling. Having a steep drop off into darkness where we would not be able to see the scale of the army that was coming in to attack us emerged out of that. I think it's the first 20 minutes. You don't get to see the monster at all you do is hear them. And I think for me that was one of the most scary ideas, because what if it didn't work?
Shooting at night hides a multitude of sins in terms of a battle. It did expand. I think we'd never thought it was going to take quite as long, although during the prep period it became obvious that the episode was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
As soon as we did get that outline, I thought, this is not what we had imagined at all. Because it has whites and dragons, fire and night work, 11 weeks of it.
It was something that you didn't want to focus on too much, you know, you just treat it day by day, tick it off.
It's always more difficult for the crew than it is for the actors. It just speaks to the quality and the hard work that goes into this show.
That's the most amazing thing about our crew, is that David and Dan write it down and then we all try to figure it out.
The scene that I've seen it many, many times, but as we get more finished shots, it really gives me a tingle, is when the Dothraki and Jorah first charge into the darkness and the big trebuchets are firing.
From a set deck perspective, we were involved with the catapults and trebuchets with armory. So Tommy provided a couple of practical trebuchets, and then we had 3 or 4 made that were background ones.
The trebuchet is a very, very large centrifugal throwing arms. I like to build everything that is practical and we can actually get the projectile to fire. We went about maybe 30 meters, which is a good distance. Not in the historical reference, it'd be a waste of time, that wouldn't get you very far. But the fact that it still throw the projectile, it would still do all the action and everything could be done in camera. Once it left the trebuchet, then obviously visual effects would take over.
The more real stuff you can have in the frame, and the less you have to lean on your facilities or your visual effects houses to give you digital things or CG elements, CG flame, CG mist, CG smoke, the better off you are.
Over the 11-week period, that's a lot of smoke, a lot of changes in weather, a lot of equipment, a lot of crew to cover all of that. We had multiple wind machines, which we had to move every shot. We had multiple smoke machines, which we also had to move from every shot, every setup, along with the snow as well. We had foam snow, we had paper snow, we had handheld snow guns, we had all sorts of things, just trying to surround every part of the action.
The fog of war sequence, the whole point is nobody knows where anybody is. Everyone underestimated how powerful, how brutal this attack was going to be. They lasted a fraction of the time they thought they were going to last. All of these are reasons for us to feel the chaos of that particular moment.
My goodness, it was overwhelming. You're on this huge set. It's filled with smoke. It feels like maybe 1,000 people on the set with extras, crew, and cast.
Death and horror coming from places you'd never imagined. Every time you think, oh, now there's a little break, and you realize, no, there's no break. It's just a crazy onslaught.
It all just starts to fall apart, and decisions have to start being made on the fly. And that's all mixed in with the stuff of like, who am I doing this for? Who am I sacrificing my family for?
It was important to see how difficult that decision was for Grey Worm to make. As soon as he pulls the rope on that trench, he knows that every one of his men he's never going to see again.
He makes a choice, but it can tell that his heart is grieving as he does so.
To read the word trench on the page doesn't sound like anything, but it took such a lot of work to try and resolve it to a point that it was a convincing method of defence. Originally, it was planned at 50 feet outside the Winterfell main gate. I think it ended up more like 80 feet. And that was a big job between art department and special effects, so it was us and Sam's team.
The complicated process of the trenches began with the concept of it being a first line of defence. Therefore, it had to be, impressive, had to be very big because of hundreds of thousands of whites attacking. We can't have real logs in there because it's burning pretty much every night for 6 weeks. It has to be a steel thing, come up with a technique for igniting all these troughs, and so you have a nice wave of fire igniters.
We put 5 different cameras on it because we knew we were only going to be able to do this a couple of times just because of the nature of it. And we'd figured out where all those 5 different cameras would need to be. And the special effects team did a great job of sort of getting that thing to light up. We'd sync the camera move to exactly the speed of how it was going to light up, and it worked really well.
For a long time, Miguel always mentioned hell to me. This episode is just turning into hell for each character. A nice moment to introduce that would be when the trench goes up, which on the one hand for our antagonists is almost a saving moment because the trench eventually keeps the army of the dead away from them, but at the same time it actually turns image-wise into hell.
We wanted them to feel, at least in that moment, maybe this is all going to work out. Maybe things are all going to be okay. Those kinds of moments, those moments of hope, help emotionally shape the episode because it gives it somewhere to go when the hope is thwarted and things go the wrong way. And we thought that would help us with the episode as a whole, in addition to providing us with a visually memorable moment.
For the actual battle itself, Dany's impatient to get in there. She's like gunning for a fight. She's ready to take this guy down. She's a fierce warrior, although you don't really see a lot of hand-to-hand combat with her, and she knows how to fight to the death, especially at this point. There's a lot of anger. She's got all of that in her to put into this fight, so it's not just the matter at hand, but I think because of everything on an emotional level that's gone on, she's able to go into her cold-blooded side.
The Night King has exhibited various powers over the series, and one of the things that we know the dead bring with them is the weather, and part of it is just battle tactics. The 2 dragons are probably our hero's best chance of winning this fight. So it's very much a conscious choice by the Night King to neuter his opponent's greatest weapon.
Dragon fighting was one of the most exciting things that we had on the table, and it was also one of the most difficult things that we had on the table. It was a definite group effort.
When you're creating something that hasn't been seen before, like 3 dragons having a fight in midair, it takes a lot of imagination. It takes looking at whatever reference you can possibly call up. What do birds of prey look like when they're going at it against one another?
It's sort of an aerial dragon dogfight. So originally the whole thing was just in this storm, and then, you know, we came up with the idea of let's get them up out of the storm, above the clouds.
The VFX boys, first of all, are brilliant. That buck is amazing. First time you go on it, you're like, this is awesome. Very hard to stay concentrated because you go in, you do like 10 minutes of a move, and then you go back to your trailer for like 45 minutes. And that's not, that sounds like an ideal day, but it's not actually what you want to be doing. You want, in some ways, as an actor, to be like the cold face, just sort of staying there, staying in the moment. Otherwise, your energy goes. So I found it really tough.
Whenever we have a shot where the dragons need to breathe fire, we want to simulate as best as possible the light effect from that fire and how it interacts with the characters and the actors in that scene and the environment. Where the dragon fire is going is moving, so we're trying to create the effect of the light moving from one place to another. That just really helps sell the believability of all that dragon fire.
We had the big flamethrower on the spider cam on stage that was shooting 40 feet of fire as fast as we could do it. We had a robot arm that moves as fast as you want. So for Syrian, when he's blasting Jon, he's so damaged by this point, so he's leaking fire. We actually did laser cuts from the digital model of those openings, and then bronze casts were made and then fitted with fire jets, so that the fire would interact with those surfaces properly, and then that was put onto this robot with a quick arm, and then the camera was also on a motion control rig too. And then we had a fire rig on the techno crane on the stage in our element shooting, and we had, it was either 6 or 8 weeks of solid element shooting.
One of the most challenging shots in episode 3 is when the direction of battle is switching and Jon Snow goes back to the castle, and Miguel saw it as a one-er. We actually shot it in a series of shots which will be cut together in the end, but one of the biggest ones was when we travel through the courtyard extensively.
Kid's very aware of the camera, and he's very good at finding his marks and finding different positions that are required.
I had to always keep track of where I was in the fight, who I was following, what I was doing. It felt much more complicated than the battles.
We needed Jon to make his way through a courtyard and bear witness to all of the characters that we know and we care about, that he knows and he cares about, dying, essentially being overwhelmed, and for him to have to stay on track, to know that the reason he's there is to get the Night King and that humanity depends on that choice.
It wasn't so much about showing any single storyline as it was getting the sense of them all mixed into this chaos together and thinking that the chaos was gonna wash over them and consume them.
It's physically challenging, it's physically demanding. I mean, we were shooting a scene that, I probably never looked cooler in my entire life. I was stood upon a pile of bodies, fending off whites.
And the funny thing was that we said to the stunt guys, and there were like about 15 of them attacking me at the same time, and they said, if you manage to get me down, take me down. I had to fight for real. And it was extremely intense and extremely exhausting. I saw some of the footage and I think it looks real because it is real.
The prop team have been very, very busy. I don't think they'll want to see another mound of dead bodies for a very long time.
Rob Cameron and Gavin Jones came up with the idea of moulding these bodies into these discs. So, you know, the on-set crew would be able to pick the discs up, move them around, and each disc would have maybe 5 bodies sort of moulded onto it. That was a piece of genius, really, and allowed us to get through the season with much greater efficiency, a much less painful sort of process in order to build up the feeling of the war dead in a way that we hadn't been able to achieve before.
Another challenge is that we not only build these massive sets, but nothing stayed the same. Every night the team would meet, and tomorrow this is what has to happen. You know, what has to be snowed, what has to be cleared, what dead bodies do we have, which dead bodies do we have, are they fresh dead?
We knew that in the episode that at some point the Night King was going to resurrect the dead. But in doing so, there's obviously all the cadavers and bodies which are in these tombs in the crypt, which would rise as well at the same time.
Nobody thought of that. He's bringing all the dead people back to life, and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people.
For us, that was exciting because it was going to be a brand new challenge. We referenced ancient mummies, we looked at corpses and skeletal figures.
It was scary because all the stunt guys that play the dead guys are in full brilliant makeup, and they're around dark corners. You don't fully know where they're all coming from.
Shooting in the crypt was a lot of fun, actually. It was the first for me seeing White Walkers. The whole action was really fun because I never get to do any action. We were running around, Tyrion and I. We felt like action stars, even though we probably ran like 5 meters.
That's not a set. That place really exists. It's terrifying down there. So it's kind of great. You have all this epic battle going on upstairs, and then this genuine, like, horror movie down below.
It was one of the scariest days of my life.
Winterfell is kind of the home for the show, and one of the things that always struck us as a horrific aspect of this is that these hallways and rooms where we spend a lot of good times with characters that we care about has now become a horror set because it's been invaded by undead. We couldn't imagine a better protagonist for that horror sequence than Arya. Partly because we care about her so much, but partly because she's the one in the midst of it.
We pick her up after being hit and taking the fall and running off. She's in a really bad way and in a lot of pain. And I guess what I was trying to play was like trying to play the drive to keep on and keep pushing on and keep going, but also this insane fear of like, what have I got myself into? What am I doing?
So the library in Winterfell was something that I was very excited about designing.
That was heavily influenced by the director Miguel Sapochnik, who wanted to have a, two-tiered room where the whites could look down.
He really wanted to be creating almost like a horror movie in there as well, to be able to build the suspense, to be able to go inside from shadow to light, and to be able to pace her around that room.
I took Maisie in there, and we were going to have 9 whites or something in there, and I gave them all a path, and then I told her she had to make her way through it without being seen. And we figured out this whole choreographed piece where everything was a near miss.
Usually every time that I've been running as Arya, I've been very focused and like head down, like running as fast as I can. And for this one, it was more of a like desperate scramble through the corridors and not being able to think clearly enough to make a plan until she's saved by Beric.
As soon as we first saw Beric in the 3rd season, we started talking to each other about like, well, why this guy? And it was always important for us that Beric have a reason and that reason be fulfilled before he dies.
When Beric tries to let Arya get away, he's trying to hold himself up, but he's also trying to stop the whites getting to her. And when I saw that, I really had a lump in my throat. I was just kind of proud of the character for being so brave.
Realizing that they are sacrificing themselves for her and realizing that she is here for a reason, and Beric clearly knows that. It's not until she sees Melisandre and business mode comes back again, and she realizes that this is what she has to do and this is what she was meant to do.
What do we say to the god of death?
Not today.
One of the great things about having this many people you care about in an episode and in a sequence together is that sleight of hand becomes a little bit easier, I hope, where you can pull people's attention and focus to people that they care about a lot, like Jon and like Dany, Theon and Bran, not to mention Tyrion and Sansa in the crypt. So hopefully you have so many places that your attention's pulled, you forget about the fact that Arya Stark ran out of that castle with the battle drums playing.
As was discussed in episode 2, the battle plan is to lure the Night King out, and so that means that Bran is the bait, and he's in the very center of Winterfell and the Godswood. The reason the Godswood was chosen is because it's such an iconic location, but it's also the weirwood tree has long been a source of power for Bran in particular.
Just when you think that it's all over, and just when you think that Jon Snow's gonna be the hero again, Arya appears through the mist. Shooting that was tedious, but so great to be able to perform all these different beats within maybe like 2 seconds of footage.
She does jump out of nowhere, and that's a wire rig. It's a wire rig we did on the location, but the location wasn't ideal. It was really hard to get a crane in there, and we've obviously got the weirwood tree, which is basically condemned. You know, it's all held together with wires. So it was tricky to do it there, and we did a version of it there, but then we had to redo it because it didn't have the ability to control it as much as we'd hoped, and it needed to be a real boom out of nowhere moment.
We did a lot of just testing, her flying through the air, making it look exactly how they wanted it to in the shot. And so my role in that was doing just all the testing for it. And then by the time we got that dialed in, we brought Maisie in to do a few jumps, and once she felt comfortable, she was in costume and did that on the day.
Maisie does almost all this stuff on her own. And she has an excellent stunt woman for the dangerous stuff, but most of it's actually Maisie. And, you know, learning how to do these various tricks with the knife and learning how to flip the knife from one hand to the other. Once we saw how well she could do it in that moment with Brienne, we thought this is the way it's gonna end against the Night King.
I'm really proud of myself. I'm proud of everyone. I'm proud of the work that was put in. And I'm grateful that it was me and not Kit.
I was pissed that it wasn't me killing the Night King. I would have given you like, I'd have bet you thousands.
I think it's probably 3 years now or something we've known that it was going to be Arya who delivers that fatal blow to the exact spot where the Child of the Forest put the Dragonglass blade to create the Night King, and he's uncreated by the Valyrian steel.
That's such a nice little full circle thing as well, that that's the knife that was destined to kill Bran, and here it is saving him.
He's the king on the chessboard, and when the king is toppled, the game is over. It doesn't matter how many pieces you have left. And so we wanted to show that, and we wanted to see where each of our characters were in these moments. So it's kind of radiating outwards from the Godswood.
At the end of that whole fight, there's this moment, and then they all drop. They call it de-animation. They just de-animated. That was so impressive because usually when you see this in a movie, most of it is CGI. But here, so much, it's been camera, it's real.
I'd be excited enough just watching that happen on screen and thinking, wow, what a great ending, but actually getting to be there and react to that as Bran is pretty special.
At the end of it, it's a victory for the living, but at great cost because some of our favorite characters fall.
Jorah's entire life has been building up to this moment. His ultimate redemption is to give his life for the woman he loves and the woman he betrayed. And we knew that that scene in his hands would be fantastic.
All he ever wanted to do was to fight to protect her. And if he could have chosen a way to die, this is how he would have chosen to die.
My favorite scene to shoot was my demise. When I read it, I just thought, yeah, of course, of course.
Holding him for the first time, she finally sees what she has closed her eyes to this whole time, and it's too late. You gotta go to your own depths to bring out that.
It's really hard to fake that kind of pure grief like that, and Amelia just really brought it in those moments. I think part of it was because she and Ian have been working together for so long, and it's all coming to an end.
We've been with these characters for so many years. We've been like to hell and back with them. It gets to a point where like it sounds crazy, but it's not a huge amount of acting.
There are a few moments in the final season where characters are saying things to each other that we don't hear, and that's very much by design. And I think Dan and I both had ideas of what he's trying to say, but we're never gonna hear those words.
We knew that episode 3 was pretty much an episode-long battle sequence. And we certainly felt exhausted by the time we were done, but that is sort of the idea of the entire episode, that you're in it with these people and you're in an impossible situation with these people. And by the end, you should feel some small fraction of the exhaustion that they feel after having endured this experience.
By the end, for Grey Worm, and I think for a lot of the characters, it's just exhaustion on a different level.
I loved every second of that. The torture and the brutality and the horror that you see in our faces is real.
It was hard and it was bloody, and I must say that I'm impressed that we made it happen.
Kudos to the crew. I don't think I've seen people work as hard as they have. Like, it's amazing the work they have done. I mean, it's a cliche, but it really couldn't have been done without them.
I've said it before, I will say it again. We have the hardest working crew in the industry, full stop.
At the helm of it, we had Miguel, who is extraordinary at shaping these incredible action sequences. And without him, that whole episode would have just crumbled. It never would have got done.
There were so many people involved in this, and there was so much thought that went into every single section. You know, it physically hurt to make that show. In television, this has probably never been done before, and it's probably never going to get done again.
best part of being a camera operator on Game of Thrones is the privilege of making a story with the camera in front of some of the best artists in the world, reading the best words that I've heard written for a long time. My name's Sean Savage. I'm the A camera operator on Dragon Unit, Game of Thrones. I started on Game of Thrones 2010. One of the first scenes I operated on Game of Thrones was some of the Night's Watch leaving the tunnel to go north beyond the wall. I've contributed to every episode since then. Over those 8 seasons, the Dragon Unit, I've had the privilege of shooting scenes like Battle of Blackwater Bay, The Red Wedding, Hardhome, which is extraordinary, an amazing sequence, followed by Bob. And then followed last year by The Ice Lake. I think by the end it'll be close on 73 episodes. Some of the challenges that the directors have thrown at us with their ideas, huge moves amongst ships and castle walls and the visual effects requirements, those technically have challenged us to our sort of limit, I'd say. I think if you ask me what my favorite scene over those 8 years was, it's when Jon Snow is forced to the ground and then trampled, and this seemingly immortal hero of ours looks like he's close to the end. Something that Miguel Sapochnik, the director, put into the show. It wasn't entirely scripted like that. Kit went to ground, I stood over him, and these stunt guys piled in, and we had a sort of safe word where we could call it off at any point. We had to see that the light closed up, so on Kit's face, and at that point, I just urged Kit to get off the ground and stand up again. And I think you can see that it is a true struggle. Bob was by far the biggest challenge, the scale of it, the organisation, and the ambition that Miguel had. The attrition of going into that situation every day solidly for 23 days was a huge challenge.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, fire!
The nature of the story of Game of Thrones and the landscape it's set in has really thrown it at us. We've abandoned sets because of floods, rock falls, snowstorms, wind. It wouldn't be Game of Thrones if these things didn't crop up. Not knowing that I would end up doing 8 years on the biggest show in the world, Game of Thrones has been absolutely fantastic because it was the right time, right place. My level of experience at the time was suited, I think, to the show. I put the right team around me on the Dragon Unit. So for me, it's been very lucky in certain ways, but, you know, it's, I think, meant to be to a degree, I feel sometimes, and I've loved it. I think it'll be a legacy of mine, which, you know, I'll carry forever.
The process of prosthetics is something I don't think people are quite aware with how extensive it is. It's such a complex department, and the build that goes into these things is quite time-consuming. From seeing our actor come to our studio and we take a head cast of him, to sticking a makeup on set is, you know, it's quite a long build time. But I think what's great for us is that it's lovely to see all our hard work and all these things we've built actually make it to the screen as well at the end of the day. An average prosthetic makeup we usually say is like about 4 to 6 weeks to build. We have so many patient actors that sit in our chair for like 4, 6 or 8 hours at a time. So by the time we usually step on set to do a rehearsal, we've already pretty much done a full day's work. So to then film and have our fun on set, making sure everything's not falling off people for 12 hours. The D-rig in the evening can take a good an hour, you know, or 2 hours. People are quite unaware of the length of time and the process that goes into these things. So each year it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. To the point now with season 8, we're sort of maxing numbers about the 70 or 80 mark on set. And in the workshop, we usually have a team of about 50 people. It's a big department to manage. I think we're very fortunate to have accumulated a really talented sort of pool of prosthetic people. I got hired season 4. We only had 6 whites filming, and these were these green screen guys. And at the time, that was a huge thing for us at the time. Cut to Hard Home the following year, where it just exploded. We had something like about 40 to 50 prosthetic guys out there at any one time applying the whites and the white walkers. When we found out 2 years ago, there's only 13 episodes left. I think we were obviously gutted and distraught, but I think it's real testament to the guys that they stuck to the word, and they're basically finishing the franchise when it should naturally end. It's become such a huge part of our life now. I think finishing next year and moving on to other projects is really daunting. I think it's probably scary for a lot of folk because we've just become part of this incredible family. The end is nigh, but I think it's going to be a big end.
When you read the scenes, there's a journey in there. And then I've got to try and find a way to achieve what's on the page and then make it interesting. You choreograph all this real action, and then I'm thinking, okay, how safe can I make it? I can put a wire on them and decel them, I can bury a mat. You know, we're trying to create this really dynamic frame of action. We'd love to go home at the end of the day and, you know, no one's paid any kind of price for it.
Action for you. Okay, there will be a background action first, guys. Ready? Ready?
We burn more people than anybody else, basically. And there is a bit of mental preparation goes into these things, but it's really controlled. It's a real process. We do lots of rehearsals where we put the masks on people, walk to where we were going to do the burn with their hands on the shoulder of their safety guys, and we line them all up.
We then really methodically practice what we would call like our fire dance, which is when you are then set on fire, the route you take in the scene to where you then lie down to be extinguished by the safety guys.
12, 13, 14, 15, out, out, out.
Safety precautions are really experienced. We have guys covering them at all times. We only burn them for 15 seconds because that ensures that we're not going to have any significant heat transfer. They wear 3 layers of Nomex underwear. It won't burn, it won't melt like man-made fabric. That's soaked in a fireproof gel we put into a fridge, and so that's taken down to almost freezing. Then they put on a thin rain suit over the top, then a fire suit on top of that, then a boiler suit to protect the fire suit, and then the costume. So there's quite a few layers going on.
The latex mask that's on your face has got a really small hole that you have to breathe through, because obviously when you're on fire, you bite down on that and that stops any fumes or flame coming through the mask. The aim of it is to be really calm, really relaxed, get your heart rate down, just listen to every single word Rowley's saying, because if you do, then the shot will work and everything will be fine.
3, 2, 1, action! 1, 2, 3.
The show just keeps getting bigger. We did 73 full fire burns during Loop Train. We did 20 in one shot. That was a record for TV. We didn't do it wantonly to set a record. I was aware of it, obviously, and everyone likes that. But, you know, it was for the shot. That was the shield wall and everyone getting hit. So it had a purpose, not just a record. It is a little stressful, but with all stunt work, it's about harnessing that stress and channeling it, you know, that kind of energy. Fear's really good. Fear will keep you safe, but you need to just channel that fear and use that energy to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah. Happy days.
I wanted to finish it. There was no way I was not going to come back for season 8, you know, but I think the story is nearly ready to be completely told. So it's mixed. So it's a little bit, it's tinged with a little bit of sadness, but proud that I've been part of it for 4 years. You know, I've done half of it, and I've enjoyed every moment of it. You know, so I will always look back on this very fondly.
Dracarys.
Things need to be shot faster and they need to be turned around faster. And this whole journey of Game of Thrones has been one of figuring out how to rise to that occasion.
We're pushing the boundaries here all the time. All eyes are on us, and we're trying to do things that nobody's done before. But showing up each year with a new stack of things to do that is fun.
It's much more than a job. It is our way of life. There's a lot about working on a project like this that's like joining the circus. We move 10,000 miles away from home and we put up our tent to put on our little show, and then we tear the tent down and move it somewhere else. We have 4 supervisors on the ground with us starting out.
Now we have 24 previous people, 3 additional supervisors.
A number of concept artists, multiple visual effects editors, and the team that works with me sort of in air traffic control has grown to 5 and 6 strong, and there's quite a bit of air traffic to control at this point.
The biggest challenge for visual effects is defining what the workload is. From the scripts, we have a really good general idea of what we're doing, but for us, it comes down to the individual shots. Every shot defines a method.
Seasons 2 and 3, we were looking at 600 and 800 shots in a given season. Now we're looking at multiples of that in a single episode. It's a remarkable demand on our team.
It's hard to say what's my favorite shot because we've done so many, but the one that's in my mind right now is the frozen lake. Syrian does a strafe, which we follow, and then we tilt up just in time for Drogon with Dany on his back to land on the island. And we're running with the whites toward the dragon, and he strafes us and wipes us all out.
Viserion death, that was an amazing moment. We're contributing what is effectively a character in the show that needs to behave in a way that elicits an emotional response from the viewer. It's a really special thing as a visual effects person to be able to play that kind of a role.
You can tell when the animators get very excited about what they're doing and they start making really gorgeous performance. When the Night King puts his hand on the dead dragon and the camera's scraping right along his scales. I mean, all of that had to look absolutely real. What I'm going to miss the most is the daily creative exercise. I'm not kidding, we've done more than 10,000 visual effects shots. I don't expect to ever be able to work with a group of people who are as devoted and talented and determined to do the best thing for this long.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime perfect storm moment where a bunch of insanely creative people come together to pull out something that none of us thought could be done, would be done, should be done. What are we going to miss about it? Oh my God, all of that. This is certainly very memorable.
I don't know what the emotional impact's going to be when we finally deliver the last shot, because I've been 100% living the show year-round for 5 years. I think it's going to be a big life change for everybody.
The kind of pomp and majesty of Dany's arrival, it just felt like the natural place to start the season.
The arrival was a way to capture what was at stake for Dany and for Jon.
Looking back to the very beginning and how young Maisie was back then and wearing the Stark soldier's helmet falling over her head, and she just looks like this little kid. And now she's a grown woman and she's there watching again, but this time she steps aside to let a little kid come in to watch because she remembers how thrilling it was. It's a whole new procession, and so instead of Robert arriving with Queen Cersei and Jaime Lannister and the Hound, it's Daenerys coming with Jon Snow. I don't think the North is the most welcoming place to outsiders. Dany's smart, she senses that distrust, and she's gonna make the best of a bad situation, but that doesn't mean that she likes it or she's happy.
When you're doing something good for people and you get met with what Sansa gives her, and they meet in the courtyard, it's understandable that she would be upset. We've been with these characters on a pretty regular basis all the time for the past however many years. The fact that they're coming back together again for the first time means more to them than it may mean to us.
The Lady of Winterfell has a nice ring to it.
So does Hand of the Queen. Depending on the Queen, I suppose.
I think that if Tyrion were to have shown up on his own to Winterfell, he would have gotten a much different reception from Sansa than he did coming as the Hand of the Queen, Daenerys Targaryen. There's also the specific thing that happens in that scene, which is Tyrion has told everybody that the Lannisters are coming to join the cause, and it's amazing to her that this person she thought was so smart would ever take Cersei at her word on something like that.
I used to think you were the cleverest man alive.
How did you survive a knife through the heart?
I didn't.
Jon Snow and Arya are two of the most important characters in the story, and they love each other very deeply. Arya was the only one who treated Jon like a real member of the family when he was a child, and he was the only one who treated her with the respect that she needed when she was a kid. Jon has invited this huge army of foreigners into their home, and Arya understands why he did it, but Arya's on Sansa's side.
You're defending her.
I'm defending our family. So is she.
I'm her family too.
Don't forget that.
Blood is definitely thicker than water when it comes to Starks.
Go on.
I don't know how to ride a dragon.
Nobody does until they ride a dragon.
No one's ever ridden a dragon except for Dany. Only Targaryens can ride dragons, and that should be a sign for Jon. Jon's not always the quickest on the uptick, but eventually he gets there.
We wanted to kind of re-anchor their relationship. It seemed important for it to involve the dragons, since the dragons play such an important role.
It's a major thing for her when she sees they have some kind of connection to him. They allow him to be around them. Then when he flies up with her and shows her where he used to hunt as a kid, I think she falls even farther in love with him.
Seeing Jon and Dany on the dragons together, it's a Jon and Dany moment, but it also seeds in the idea that these creatures will accept Jon Snow as one of their riders.
Don't be afraid.
One of the challenges, but also one of the exciting things about this episode, this whole season, is bringing together characters who have never met. Sam has long been one of the more important characters in this story, but he's never seen Queen Daenerys, and yet they're connected by various threads. The obvious one, which we know from the beginning of the scene, is Jorah. Sam saved him, and so Jorah owes Sam this great debt. What none of them realize until midway through the scene is that they have another horrible connection.
There are all these things that you know about those characters that the other characters don't know, and some of them are very important. Dany murdered Samwell's father and brother.
That's a really complicated thing for Sam because he had a really fraught relationship with his father. You know, Sam's older brother was not a bad person and died really quite bravely, standing by his father's side.
John Bradley did an excellent job. The difference between the way he takes the news of his father's death and the way he takes the news of his brother's death, it was a subtle thing that he does with very few words. It's the kind of thing that he could find out in a number of different ways, but it seemed like an effective preamble and way into that later moment.
Daenerys. She executed my father and brother. And I've executed men who disobeyed me. You've also spared men. Thousands of wildlings when they refused to kneel. I wasn't a king, but you were.
The fact that Jon's real parents were who Jon's real parents were is not news to us at this point, but what we don't know is the way that Jon is going to take this. How's the explosion going to look?
Sam, as a brother of the Night's Watch, and Jon are more brothers than Bran and Jon ever really were. He knows it's going to hurt Jon, and it's going to shatter his whole worldview. For all they know, the Army of the Dead could attack the next day, and someone has to tell Jon before that.
He's being told something that he both knows is true and can't handle. So he tries to throw things in front of it to prevent him from having to deal with the truth of what he's being told. The thing he throws in front of it here is the fact that it means his father was lying to him his whole life.
You've never been a bastard. You are true heir to the Iron Throne.
The truth that Samwell tells Jon is probably the most incendiary fact in the entire world of the show. We chose to play the whole thing on Jon's face because as great a job as John Bradley is doing presenting this information, he's really just presenting information we know already.
Daenerys is our queen. She shouldn't be. It's treason. It's the truth.
When I was a child, my brother would tell me a bedtime story about the man who murdered our father and watched as his blood poured onto the floor. He told me other stories about all the things we would do to that man once we took back the Seven Kingdoms.
When Jaime shows up to Winterfell, it's very difficult for almost anybody to know how to feel about it. On the one hand, Dany looks at him as this is the person who murdered her father, and even if she has come to terms with who her father was and what her father really was, it probably doesn't entirely erase the sting of her father's murderer showing up on her doorstep.
Your sister pledged to send her army north. I don't see an army.
She never had any intention of sending her army north.
Tyrion has made a number of mistakes now, and Dany's really at the end of her patience because she has a lot of fondness and respect for Tyrion, but many of his plans have really gone awry. And now Jaime Lannister's here, but not with the Lannister army.
Your Grace, I know my brother.
Like you knew your sister.
Tyrion can't really fight back because he knows she's right. I mean, he really did make a grievous mistake. If Tyrion has a flaw, he's a very clever man, but sometimes clever people overestimate their own cleverness.
You don't know me well, Your Grace, but I know Sir Jaime. He is a man of honor.
For Brienne, I think she's in love with someone who doesn't realize that she is because that kind of experience hasn't been a part of her life. She's feeling things that she can't really process because she never grew up in a world where those things were an option.
She's so used to Jaime taunting her and being the kind of nasty Jaime Lannister of old that she's just suspicious at first that he's playing her and that he's gonna reveal his true intent.
I'm not the fighter I used to be, but I'd be honored to serve under your command if you'll have me.
He really believes in her as a soldier and he wants to be there next to her, so I think she's really shocked by his sincerity.
Lady Sansa, I was hoping we could speak alone.
Dany comes to Sansa with a bit of an olive branch, trying to find a way inside that kind of cool exterior that Sansa presents. And one commonality between them is they both love Jon. Dany's his lover and Sansa's his sister. It's very much coming at it from the point of view of a monarch trying to make peace with her subject, and Sansa's not quite willing to accept Dany as her monarch yet. She's suspicious of people for a reason.
What about the North? It was taken from us. We took it back, and we said we'd never bow to anyone else again. What about the North?
She's had too many hard experiences not to be suspicious of people, and she sees Dany as possibly a tyrant, as someone who's has a lot of power and is seeking to get even more.
They're coming. We can't beat them in a straight fight.
So what can we do? In the War Council scene, there's a lot going on under the surface. The most important thing about that scene is understanding the lay of the land and understanding what their intentions are, what their plans are, what their expectations are, so we know what we're looking at.
The Night King made them all. They follow his command. If he falls, getting to him may be our best chance.
Things may not go entirely according to plan, so we thought it was very important for people to know what everyone in the room expected to happen, was worried would happen, hoped would happen. In addition to that, there are a lot of human moments.
We'll put you in the crypt where it's safest.
No, I'll wait for him in the Godswood.
We're not leaving you alone out there.
He won't be. I'll stay with him.
One thing that was definitely going on was how Theon felt after returning to Winterfell and how he's using this battle as an attempt to try to make good to the extent that that's possible on the horrible mistakes that he made.
I took this castle from you. Let me defend you now.
You're not the knight?
Women can't be knights.
Why not?
Tradition.
Any knight can make another knight. Kneel, Lady Brienne.
Brienne has been more knightly than any of the knights I think we've seen.
I mean, she's a paragon of strength and honor and being true to your word. When Jaime knights her, it's a general kind of validation she's wanted her whole life. But even more importantly, it's the acceptance and validation of Jaime, who she obviously has feelings towards that she's never really come to terms with or even allowed to bubble to the surface of her consciousness, but they're there all the same, and we can see all of those things swirling.
Sir Brienne of Tarth, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
For us, what was interesting about this episode was always that it's our last night together, and everyone, I think, would face the end in different ways.
We're probably going to die soon. I ought to know what it's like before that happens.
Some characters want to make love for the first time because they've never done it before. There are other characters who are getting drunk and singing songs, and then there are characters who are just trying to find some kind of human solace together, like Sansa and Theon. Everyone faces it in different ways, but they're all facing it, and that's why this episode was so important to us, because it's, you know, all these characters that we've been following for so long, and now they're all facing a common enemy.
How about a song? One of you must know one.
High in the halls of the kings who are gone, Jenny would dance with her ghost.
Daniel's got a really lovely voice, and we knew we wanted a song in this episode. We've had a song in several of the seasons. We haven't had an original in a while, so this felt like the place for it, and Daniel felt like the singer.
The ones who'd been gone for so very long, she couldn't remember their names. They spun her around on the damp old stones, spun away all her sorrow and pain.
The song, I believe, is in George's books, at least the first verse is in the books, and then we added some lyrics and Ramin came up with the music for it.
Wanted to leave.
Move! We've been building towards this for so long now. You think back to the very beginning of the very first episode, and it's beyond the wall where the White Walkers are stalking a group of rangers. So this is the culmination of one of the key storylines in the whole show. And this is for everything. We've been talking for a long time how the Night King's forces have been growing in power, and most of the living have been kind of openly disdainful of the threat, and now there's no choice but to fight it. I really love the way the first 10 minutes or so plays out, because there's so much tension before there's any encounter with the enemy. You know, as much as they try to conceal it, people are terrified because this is death coming for them. You know, so much of it is just kind of, on one hand, setting the mood for the episode, and the other hand, showing us where these characters are going to be.
The entire episode takes place in Winterfell, and you have 19 or 20 characters all involved in a very chaotic situation that needs many, many locations to service it.
Because it's such a long battle in this episode, it's important that we feel the ebb and flow. And so there are moments when you think things are going a little bit better for the living.
Tell them to lift their swords.
We felt like it was important to have that moment of hope when Mel comes in and lights up the rocks, and they all ride off into battle.
Zobria Issa se signo to ledus.
We wanted our characters to feel like maybe this is all going to work out. Maybe things are all going to be okay.
We've seen how devastating a Dothraki charge can be just with their regular swords, and now when they're galloping into combat with flaming Araks, it's what could possibly stand against that? What they see is just the end of the Dothraki, essentially.
They have a plan, and it's important to wait for the Night King to reveal himself and then have 2 dragons against 1 dragon and a really good chance of defeating him. One thing that they couldn't have foreseen was Dany's reaction to seeing the Dothraki decimated. Jon is the person who wants to stick to the plan, but the Dothraki aren't Jon's. They're not loyal to Jon, they're loyal to Dany. And I think that Dany can't bring herself to just watch them die, and so the plan starts to fall apart the second she gets on her dragon, so he does too, and then we take it from there.
We knew this episode was going to be almost entirely battle, and that can get really boring really quickly.
You can watch it for a certain number of minutes before the effect starts to dampen.
Part of it was making sure that we really stayed focused on the characters, and so whether it's Arya's storyline, or Sansa and Tyrion down the crypt, or Jon Snow and Dany up on the dragons, kind of like all these separate little battles within the greater battle.
Lyanna Mormont was supposed to be a one-scene character, and then we met Bella Ramsey, and we realized that we would not be doing our jobs if we kept her as a one-scene character.
My mother wasn't a great beauty or any other kind of beauty. She was a great warrior, though. She died fighting for your brother, Rob.
We knew that you can't give a big death to everybody who dies in this battle, because which would have been too much. But there also, if she were to die, there was no way to not make a moment of it. So that's where the zombie giant comes in. It just did add a whole level of complexity to that moment that I'm sure a lot of people would have been okay with not having there if we had demanded to cut it. But I think they also understood why we needed to give one of the strongest, smaller people in the show a chance to go out taking down one of the strongest, larger things we've ever seen in the show. Situation where people are fighting, Arya needs to play a central role because she's one of the best at it, and she's one of the most fun to watch doing it.
Even for Arya, she can't take on a horde of whites by herself, and especially when her head gets smacked, she's no longer at 100%. It's just about survival at that point.
Otherwise, she's completely unstoppable, and she never loses her cool, and that's amazing, and it's a lot of fun to watch, but it's one note. So we decided that almost rewinding the clock on who Arya Stark is to back before she became the sort of magical figure that she's become would really be interesting. It would also give us a chance to change up the nature of the story we were telling.
We talked about Winterfell as kind of the home for the show, and one of the things that always struck us as a horrific aspect of this is that these hallways and rooms where we spend a lot of good times and quiet times with characters that we care about has now become a horror set because it's been invaded by undead soldiers.
Before that point, there's sort of an agoraphobia to the whole thing, where you're in this giant, wide open space, and everywhere you look, there's something that could be coming to kill you. Once you get inside Winterfell, everything contracts, and the walls literally start to close in around you, and something is there in the dark with you, but you don't know exactly where it is. And we thought that the pace change and the tonal change, it was really important to have that in this episode. Otherwise, the episode would start to feel monotonous.
Dracarys.
We thought it was important that whatever the plan was, that it not just work out, because that would be kind of dull. While there's no reason to know for certain that the fire wouldn't kill or destroy the Night King, there's also no particular reason to believe that it would. And then a few moments after this happens, the Night King brings them a whole new, larger undead problem by taking all of their own who have been killed in the course of this battle and turning them into the enemy.
I mean, we talked about various endings for Jorah for a long time, but you know, you think about Jorah, from the very first time we met him, he was with Dany. And from that time, he's been mostly by her side. Part of Jorah's tragedy is that he was in love with a woman who couldn't love him back, but he's accepted that for quite a long time. And at the same time, he was going to fight for her as long as he could and as well as he could.
There had never been a moment where she more needed someone to fight to protect her than this moment. And if he could have chosen a way to die, this is how he would have chosen to die. So it was something we thought would be powerful to give him.
The reason the gods was chosen is because it's such a source of power for those who believe in the old gods, and for Bran in particular. So we know that the Weirwood Tree and the Three-Eyed Raven have a very deep connection. That was always the location where Bran was going to be waiting for the Night King.
I just want you to know the things I did.
Everything you did brought you where you are now. Where you belong. Home.
It's not like the show is entirely about people redeeming themselves and then it's all over. But if the canvas is big enough, there are spaces for those redemptive moments.
I think what was really important for Theon at the end was hearing that thank you from Bran, because Bran knows what's going to happen.
Theon. You're a good man. Thank you.
He knows he's dead. He knows he's not going to be able to kill the Night King. But I think what's really heroic about his action is that we're all going to die, and we know we're not going to be able to defeat death at the end. But you know, it's how you face those final moments, and he chooses to run straight at it. And I think he dies in a way that makes us really proud of him and the journey he's gone through. For God, I think it's probably 3 years now or something, we've known that it was going to be Arya who delivers that fatal blow.
She seemed like the best candidate, provided we weren't thinking about her in that moment. One of the great things about having this many people you care about in a sequence together is that you can kind of pull people's attention and focus to people that they care about a lot, like Jon and like Dany, Theon and Bran, not to mention Tyrion and Sansa in the crypt. So you're going all over the place with people who you're desperately worried for, and hopefully you forget about the fact that Arya Stark ran out of that castle with the battle drums playing and going towards some purpose, and we don't know what until it happens.
We hope to kind of avoid the expected, and Jon Snow has always been the hero, the one who's been the savior, but it just didn't seem right to us for this moment. We knew it had to be Valyrian steel, to the exact spot where the Child of the Forest put the Dragonglass blade to create the Night King, and he's uncreated by the Valyrian steel. At the end of it, it's a victory for the living, but at great cost, because some of our favorite characters fall along the way.
We knew from the beginning, once we handed the outline in, what we were in for. The directors, Miguel Sapochnik, took what we were doing and defined this episode. Miguel did a tremendous amount of heroic heavy lifting on this front. He knew that if the planning wasn't there, we never would have ended up with the consistent excellence that he delivered.
It is to their immense credit that not only that they endured it, but that they did such a great job the whole time they were there.
It's a real testament to the entire Belfast crew who gave us something that no amount of money could ever buy. The beginning of 804 is a chance for the characters in the show to say goodbye.
We really wanted to show just how many people fell defending Winterfell and defending the living. Thousands of them are on these massive pyres. The feast scene was a very different tone than the scene in the first episode of the series. Everyone's thinking about what they've just seen and the people they've lost. They've just burnt their comrades' bodies, so it's, you know, it has that kind of appropriate, dark, somber beginning.
Dany kind of structures the feast scene in a way. I mean, she's really the person whose emotions and choices are guiding the scene.
And things start to shift a little bit when Daenerys calls forward Gendry and names him the new Lord of Storm's End.
Gendry.
It's almost like as the queen, she's giving people permission to celebrate what they've done.
Things start to relax a little bit. These people did survive and they won, they emerged victorious. And so what started as a very funereal scene gradually starts to shift into more of a party atmosphere as people get drunker and drunker. That shift does not happen with Daenerys. She's scarred by the events that just took place, but she's also very much thinking about what Jon Snow told her, and she's really shaken when she sees everyone celebrating with him and talking about what a madman and what a king he is for getting on a dragon.
He has love and respect from these people that even with the gesture that she just made, she can't ever equal.
She realizes that his true identity is a real threat to her if it comes out. So she's in a fairly dark place, and while other people are starting to try to celebrate their survival and their victory, Dany's not in a celebratory mood.
After the feast, she comes to talk to him, and with the intention of making this all work out and of bringing things back to the way they were before.
There's a moment where they're kissing and it seems like things are kind of getting back to where they were, but it's almost as if he remembers all of a sudden what she really is. It's tense for him. For her, she grew up hearing all these stories about how their ancestors who were related to each other were also lovers, and it doesn't seem that strange to her. For him, it is a strange thing.
Once Dany introduces the idea that everything can be as it was if Jon keeps this secret buttoned down and tells no one, she's introducing a conflict that plays forward.
From his standpoint, he's already declared his loyalty to her. He's promised her, and he's a man of his word. But he's also, you know, a family man, and so the idea that he wouldn't tell Sansa and Arya about his true identity, it just seems very wrong to him.
I've never been a Stark.
He thinks he can have it both ways, that he can tell Arya and Sansa the truth about who he really is, and he can maintain his loyalty to Dany, and everyone's going to learn to live together.
I need to tell you something.
One thing everybody who comes into contact with this information seems to understand is how incendiary the information is. Sansa's left with a very difficult decision because she promises Jon that she won't tell anyone, and yet when she's sitting up there on that wall with Tyrion, she knows what will happen if she gives Tyrion this information. She's a student of Littlefinger, and she knows how information travels, and she can think many steps ahead into the game the way Littlefinger did, and know that if she tells Tyrion, it's almost impossible for Tyrion not to tell Varys. And if she I think these are all things that have been occurring to Sansa between the time we see her get that information and the time she passes the message on.
Tyrion. What if there's someone else?
I think the Jaime-Brienne relationship has always been fascinating to us because they're such dissimilar characters, and yet there's a real chemistry between them.
Tyrion kind of calls out the elephant in the room, and it manages to drive Brienne out of the room, and in doing so, drives Jaime out of the room as well. Even as drunk as they both are, it's impossible for them to confront what they're doing with words, even as they're doing it, until the very end of the scene. The vulnerability that they show runs very counter to who they are as people. I do believe that when Jaime decides to stay behind with Brienne, it's a choice that he makes with every intention of seeing it through. When he hears what Cersei's done, I think that's the turning point for him. At that point, Jaime really has to take a really long, uncomfortable look at who he really is.
As much as Jaime cares for Brienne and admires her and loves her, he's got almost an addiction to Cersei that he just can't break. So even though he's given a kind of a chance at happiness and some kind of different life for himself, he he can't take it. He can't, he makes the choice to go back to Cersei. Part of the story here is that while we've been concentrating on Winterfell and the fight against the army of the dead, Dany's other enemies have not been just sitting still. They've been planning for the final battle. We saw in season 7 that Qyburn had invented this giant dragon-killing scorpion, and it didn't quite work. Qyburn went back to the drawing board and he made even larger, more powerful scorpions. Dozens of them are now lining the walls of King's Landing, and dozens more are mounted on the decks of the Iron Fleet. While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, they certainly haven't forgotten about her, and they're just waiting for her to come back. At this point, they would have gotten news that her armies emerged victorious and were going to head south, and so they're just waiting in ambush for her return.
In some ways, the most important thing that happens to Daenerys in 4 is the death of her second dragon. Now she's got one dragon, and that dragon presumably is just as vulnerable as Rhaegal was. So there's the mourning of a child, which is very real to her. And then their best friend is taken. Dany knows that once Cersei has Missandei, that she's not going to see Missandei alive again.
This is a moment for Cersei where she has a chance to maybe to flee and get away if she surrenders, but that's, I think anyone who knows Cersei knows she's not going to make that choice. Her feeling is, if I give up the throne, I'm dead. And so my only chance now is to win. And that's what she says to Ned Stark in season 1.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Dany is this young queen coming to try to usurp her, and Cersei's not going to give up the throne that easily. She's captured an enemy, and this is how Cersei deals with enemies. Tyrion's perspective is, you know, while we have these various wars for supremacy and everything, let's not forget about the people who are going to suffer the most from it. He can envision what will happen in King's Landing if these two armies clash and dragons are involved, and it's an obvious catastrophe. She feels like the odds are actually pretty good for her at this point, and she's willing to roll the dice. I think for Cersei, the only good prisoner is a dead prisoner.
She's really back where she was at the very beginning. Emotionally, she's alone in the world, and she can't really trust anybody.
People have underestimated Dany's strength many times before, and no one's really done very well underestimating her strengths.
Unlike then, she's extremely powerful, and unlike then, she's filled with a rage that's aimed at one person specifically.
I think what's probably echoing in Dany's head in those final moments would be Missandei's final words. Dracarys is clearly meant for Dany. Missandei knows that her life is over, and she's saying, you know, light them up.
There's something you need to know.
Someone has betrayed me.
Varys.
He knows the truth about Jon.
He does.
Dany's an incredibly strong person. She's also someone who has had really close friendships and close advisors for her entire run of the show. You look at those people who have been closest to her for such a long time, and almost all of them have either turned on her or died, and she's very much alone. And that's a dangerous thing for someone who's got so much power, to feel that isolated. So at the very time when she needs guidance and those kind of close friendships and advice the most, everyone's gone.
I think that Varys knew that it was unlikely that he would survive the attempt to overthrow Dany in favor of Jon. And he also knew that ethically, in his mind, had no choice but to try to do that anyway.
It was me.
Goodbye, old friend.
I think that Tyrion is saying goodbye to his best friend in the world outside of his brother.
Dracarys.
And the amount of guilt that he feels over being the cause for his best friend's imminent death, it's hard to really get your head around.
I don't have love here. I only have fear.
You will always be my queen.
Jon Snow is someone that she's fallen in love with, and as far as she's concerned, by this point, Jon has betrayed her by telling people about his true identity, and also the fact that he's unable to return her affections at this point.
All right, then.
Let it be fear.
I think that when she says, let it be fear, she's resigning herself to the fact that she may have to get things done in a way that isn't pleasant, and she may have to get things done in a way that is horrible to lots of people.
Mercy is our strength. Our mercy towards future generations. He will never again be held hostage by a tyrant.
She chose violence. A Targaryen choosing violence is a pretty terrifying thing. Even when you look back to season 1, when Khal Drogo gives the Golden Crown to Viserys and her reaction on watching her brother's head melted off.
He was no dragon.
And he was a terrible brother, you know, so I don't think anyone out there was crying when Viserys died, but there is something kind of chilling about the way that Dany has responded to the death of her enemies. And if circumstances had been different, I don't think the side of Dany ever would have come out. If Cersei hadn't betrayed her, if Cersei hadn't executed Missandei, if Jon hadn't told her the truth, like if all these things had happened in any different way, then I don't think we'd be seeing this side of Daenerys Targaryen.
I don't think she decided ahead of time that she was going to do what she did. And then she sees the Red Keep, which is to her the home that her family built when they first came over to this country 300 years ago. It's in that moment on the walls of King's Landing when she's looking at that symbol of everything that was taken from her, when she makes the decision to make this personal. We wanted her to be just death from above, as seen from the perspective of the people who are on the business end of that dragon. In most large stories like this, it seems like there's a tendency to focus on the heroic figures and not pay much attention to the people who may be suffering from the repercussions of the decisions made by those heroic people. And we really wanted to keep our perspective and our sympathies on the ground at this moment, because those are the people who are really paying the price for the decisions that she's making. I think that Jon is also in a kind of denial. At first, the siege is a war. Soldiers killing soldiers. That's what war is.
I think Jon is someone who's always been a very good soldier, who's never enjoyed being a soldier. He's been trained as a fighter from the time he was a little boy. And he's quite good at it. He's quite good at leading men into battle, and he also hates it. I think for him, it's all starts out seeming like it's gonna work out, and then it turns into a nightmare.
When she takes off and starts burning the city, the Unsullied on the ground and the Northmen on the ground take that as their cue that it's a moral free-for-all. The good guys are behaving like the bad guys, and the bad guys in this shot are the ones who are doing all of these horrific things around him, who are his own men. The moral lines that he's drawn for himself in his own life can't be maintained for everyone in all situations.
Go home, go.
It's a small scene, but it's also for us one of the most important scenes in the whole episode, because it's the culmination of their story together.
And you'll be dead too if you don't get out of here.
I'm going to kill her.
The road to vengeance always ends in one place, which is what the Hound is saying to her here. I've made my choice a long time ago, and this could only end in one possible way for me. But for you, you have so many other options.
Look at me! You want to be like me?
The Hound has genuinely come to have affection for Arya. I think he loves her as much as he's capable of loving someone. And he knows that if she comes with him at this point, she's not going to make it out of there.
Sandor. Thank you.
Hello, big brother.
We've always wanted to see these two face off again, and they finally did. It struck us that it would be kind of apocalyptically beautiful to see them fighting on this stairway to nowhere, with the sky in the background and the dragon flying by and the flames everywhere.
We knew that these two were going to die together at each other's hands, and we knew that the Hound's death had to be a death by fire. So the one thing stronger in the Hound than his fear of fire is his hatred of the person who put that fear there in the first place. Feels like you needed a perspective to carry you through this horror, like you need a Virgil to take you through the hell that Dany's building.
The reason we decided to follow Arya out of King's Landing and to see the fall of King's Landing through her eyes is something that we talked about with an earlier episode. You just care a lot more when you're with a character that you care about. So if we saw a lot of extras running around on fire and buildings falling apart, it might have been visually interesting, but it wouldn't have had much of an emotional impact. But when you're there on the ground with Arya, who's one of the people we care the most about, then everything takes on that much more of an edge.
We knew that the Hound would be convincing her to part ways with him and to not go to her death. And once she decides she needs to get out of the city, well, she's in the worst possible place you can be. So she's got to get from that central point all the way outside the walls of the city. It's the longest, hardest journey anybody has to make in the entire episode.
You know, there's the scene several years ago where Jaime and Bronn are talking about how they want to go, and Jaime's talking about dying in the arms of the woman he loves. And this is it.
I think he knows that they belong together, that they came into this world together, that they need to go out of this world together.
Once he goes through the various exits and they're all clogged up with rubble and there's no way out, and he knows there's no way out, he's just trying to calm down the woman he loves because he knows this is it.
Look at me! Just look at me. Nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. Only us.
I think Jaime, by the end of episode 5, has come to terms with who he really is. And he may not be happy with who he really is, but he knows he's not. He knows what matters to him, and Cersei is what matters to him.
Aegon, fourth of his name, is remembered by history as the unworthy. Quite a feat considering the other kings of Westeros. But even in a family not known for equanimity, Aegon stands out for spiteful incompetence. He tore apart the realm simply because he couldn't rule himself, much less Westeros. As a young prince, Aegon's wit made him beloved at court and won him forgiveness for youthful indiscretions. But the cold steel of the Iron Throne didn't temper his passions. King Aegon proclaimed that if he had to spend his days being pricked by 1,000 swords, he'd spend his nights pricking others with his one. Lords sent their daughters from court so they would not catch the king's eye, whilst other lords summoned the daughters to court, so they would. The only woman in whom he took no pleasure was his sister and wife, Daenerys, even after she gave him a son and heir, Daeron. Perhaps Aegon was jealous of her supposed love for his brother, the legendary hero Prince Aemon, the Dragon Knight. Aegon was most certainly jealous of him, not of his bravery or honor, but how young maidens swooned and old whores cried at the songs about him. But most likely, Aegon disregarded his wife and son because he chafed at restraints of any kind, be they the bonds of marriage, or patrimony, or even reason. When Prince Daeron objected to his father's foolish plan to invade Dorne, Aegon incited a lick-spittle lord to accuse the queen of adultery with Aemon, making Daeron illegitimate. Prince Aemon defended the queen's honor in trial by combat. But while the lord's claim publicly died with him, no sword can kill a rumor. Out of spite and pique, Aegon had seeded doubt into his own heir's claim to the throne, which bore bitter fruit with the birth of another son, the bastard Daemon Waters, by the king's own cousin. Raised in the Red Keep on account of his mother's royal blood, Daemon grew tall and powerful, and excelled at all the martial skills that men wrongly value in leaders. Instead of protecting his own heir from a rival, Aegon knighted Daemon at 12 and shocked the realm by bestowing on him the Conqueror's own Valyrian steel sword. He even let the boy renounce his common bastard's name and take the Targaryen sword's name for his own, becoming Daemon Blackfire. Still, though a name can change, blood can't. And Daeron was Aegon's only true-born son, until he wasn't. On his deathbed, Aegon forever earned his epithet by legitimizing all his bastards, from the base-born sons of whores to the great bastards of noble ladies, including Daemon. Fittingly, Aegon's last act was to thrust himself into the realm and seed chaos. A Targaryen without self-restraint may have led Westeros to the brink of ruin, but the Highborn pushed it over. Though Daeron governed justly and wisely, correcting the worst excesses of his father's rule, many lords had grown rich off these excesses and did not approve of Daeron's reforms, particularly the peace he struck with Dorne. The malcontents rallied to Daemon and whispered that he should be king instead of his brother, whom, thanks to Aegon, many suspected was a bastard. At first, Daemon indulged these lords out of courtesy and vanity, but over time their grievances and flattery wore down his objections, along with any sense of obligation to the half-brother who had granted him lands and a wife. Daemon agreed to claim the throne by right of birth, and more importantly, arms. A wheel with two hubs will not turn, and a kingdom with two kings will burn, as the saying goes. Not that such a cost ever stopped anyone with even the remotest claim and opportunity, much less House Blackfire. Their rebellions consumed tens of years and thousands of lives. First Daemon's own, then his son, Daemon II, who reigned for a night. Then another son, Haegon, crowned by Bittersteel, another legitimized great bastard who had founded the Golden Company to support the Blackfire claim. When Haegon was executed, Bittersteel crowned Haegon's eldest son, Daemon III, who in turn was slain by their Lord Commander of the King's Guard, Sir Duncan the Tall. Finally, Meleys the Monstrous fell to Sir Barristan Selmy in the War of the Ninepeny Kings, and the Blackfire Rebellion ended with the extinction of the entire line, as is appropriate. Fire is only black when it is burned to ash. Perhaps that was the true problem with the Targaryens. The blood of the dragon runs hot, and fire consumes. Perhaps what Westeros needs is a ruler born not from fire, but from snow. King's Landing is both a city and a curse. Aegon the Conqueror was the first king to land there. His first conquest, a tiny village at the mouth of the Blackwater River, where he raised a wooden fort. When it became clear that Aegon would earn his title, people flocked to the fort and renamed it King's Landing in his honor. The ploy succeeded, and Aegon chose King's Landing for his capital over older and more beautiful cities like Old Town and anywhere else. The currying of royal favor thus became the foundation of the city, and blood its bricks. Maegor the Cruel, Aegon's son, completed the city's famous Red Keep to hold the trappings of power, the royal family, the King's Guard, and the Iron Throne. To maintain the new castle's secrets, Maegor murdered all its masons and craftsmen at a feast, which he catered with the new castle's servants, who soon found all its secrets for themselves. When the Faith Militant challenged his rule, Maegor raised their sept of remembrance to the ground with them inside at prayer and erected the dragon pit on the ashes. But the great dragons it housed were attacked by the very low-born people they were meant to terrify. Thousands of people died in the attempt, but hundreds of thousands lived in King's Landing. And now the only dragons in the city are golden. Like most kings, Aegon and Maegor missed a central truth. That a king lands is less important than what he lands on. The people, who will never visit his Red Keep, or his Dragon Pit, or any of his noble monuments to nobility, because they're too busy holding up his realm. Without the slums of Flea Bottom and the poor and desperate folk it produces, who would fight the king's wars and cook the king's meals, and admire him as he rode past at speed. Without its winding dark alleys and pot shops, where would the Red keep emptied sewage? Of all kinds. Without the street of flour, the king would have no bread. Without the street of steel, the king's armies would have no swords, armor, or victories. Without the street of looms, the king would go naked. And without the street of silk, he wouldn't enjoy it. Without the street of sisters, the king would have no humility. It leads from the ruin of the Dragon Pit to the ruin of the great sept of Baelor, where the Targaryens and Baratheons buried their kings, until Cersei Lannister unburied them. Now those kings are ashes, scattered on the wind, and nobody marked where they landed. A palace without people is a tomb. A realm without people is scenery. Though the Targaryens had forged the Seven Kingdoms in fire and blood, they didn't govern with them. Until they did. Maegor, first of his name, defined counsel as confirmation and disagreement as treason. 3 Grand Maesters tried to avert disaster. Instead of taking their advice, Maegor took their heads. As a second son and exile, Maegor was never meant to rule. But no sooner did Maegor hear of his brother's death than he flew Balerion to Dragonstone and demanded the crown. Only the Grand Maester dared object that the throne should pass to his older brother's firstborn son, Prince Aegon. Maegor insisted that the Iron Throne should go to the man with the strength to seize it, and beheaded the Grand Maester. Prince Aegon soon took him at his word. He claimed his father's dragon, raised a host of Westermen, and marched on King's Landing while Maegor was in Old Town. Far from the capital, Maegor couldn't rally an army to match Aegon's. So he ordered his banners to swarm Aegon's larger army from all sides, confusing the young prince and slowing his advance. Beneath the god's eye, Maegor's disparate forces came together and attacked Aegon as Maegor himself swooped down from the clouds. For the first time since the doom of Valyria, dragon fought dragon in the sky. But Aegon's dragon was no match for Balerion the Dread, who was 4 times its size. When Aegon fell to his death, his army broke and fled. For slaying his own nephew, Maegor forever after became known as the Cruel, though of course, not to his face. The next Grand Maester dared object to Maegor taking a 3rd wife, when taking his 2nd wife had ruined his brother's reign, because Maegor's 1st wife was the niece of the High Septon. But Maegor beheaded the Grand Maester and declared war on the faith. He set fire to the Riverlands, the Westerlands, and the Reach in a campaign to root out disloyal lords, and sponsored a more pliant High Septon. None of it worked. Maegor may have returned to the capital with 2,000 skulls of the faith militant, but most of them weren't soldiers. They were simple folk who had sheltered the outlaw Septons, or turned out in droves to hear them denounce the wicked king. The 3rd Grand Maester dared to declare Maegor the father of his own heir. But when his 2nd wife miscarried, and Maegor saw the monstrous stillbirth, Maegor beheaded the Grand Maester for his insolent adherence to truth. So he had no one to warn him when his 3rd wife, sensing an advantage, declared that his 2nd wife had been unfaithful, and produced a list of potential fathers of the misshapen child. Not only did Maegor execute his 2nd wife and her father, his own Hand of the King, but he also marched on her family's castle and slaughtered everyone who bore a drop of her family's blood. But his 3rd wife couldn't give him a child either. Desperate to cement his stolen throne with an heir, Maegor took 3 wives at once, known as the Black Brides because each were women he'd widowed in his wars. All 3 women grew full with child in time, but each gave birth to the same twisted monstrosities as his 2nd wife. One need not be a maester, much less a Grand Maester, to deduce the common thread here. Though Maegor stamped out the fires of rebellion, his cruelty and fear only scattered more tinder over the realm until even the smallest ember could set the realm alight. One day, the faith militant emerged from the shadows, and the lords sent to quash it joined it instead. His hand resigned and retired to his island home. Finally, House Baratheon declared for Maegor's own nephew as the rightful king. The Lannisters, Tyrells, and Arryns soon joined, adding more than half the might of Westeros to the prince and his 2 dragons, which became 3 when Maegor's niece and involuntary Black Bride stole away from the Red Keep with her dragon. Her treason wasn't even the last. Maegor's own Lord Admiral sailed the royal fleet into his nephew's harbor, but most fitting of all, when Maegor tried to send ravens to call his banners, he found that his 4th Grand Maester had learned from his predecessors and fled. Maegor spent one final night on the Iron Throne. He was found in the morning with his wrists slashed and one of the throne's blades jutting from his throat. Nobody knows if it was one of his queens, or Kingsguard, or one of the thousands who wanted him dead, or even Maegor himself, frustrated that his body had failed his will. Whoever the culprit, no doubt he died as all tyrants do, believing that history would vindicate him. It hasn't. History may be written with fire and blood, but histories aren't, as any good advisor could have warned him. The coin of Ares, second of his name, had landed on madness. But half the coins of the Targaryens had landed so. Yet only Ares would be known as the Mad King, thanks in no small part to the defiance of Duskendale. Duskendale was the greatest port on Blackwater Bay until Aegon built King's Landing. As the capital grew richer and more prosperous, it sucked ships and gold away from Duskendale. To halt its long decline, the Lord of Duskendale, Sir Dennis Darklyn, petitioned King Aerys for a royal charter that would allow him to levy his own port fees and taxes, which would obviously be lower than in King's Landing. The Hand of the King, Tywin Lannister, refused. But, knowing of the tension between the Hand and its king, Sir Dennis invited the king to Duskendale to evaluate his petition himself rather than deferring to his Hand. When Tywin admonished the king to refuse, as any sensible advisor would, a petulant and bristling Aerys instead accepted, traveling to Duskendale with a small retinue and only one of his Kingsguard. As soon as Aerys stepped within the city, Sir Dennis seized him, killing the Kingsguard and the few others who dared defend their king. Aerys was hauled to the dungeons to have his beard pulled and have other petty cruelties inflicted on his royal person. Lord Tywin immediately raised an army and marched on Duskendale, but Sir Dennis threatened to kill the king at the first signs of an assault. If Sir Dennis hoped to force Tywin to offer terms, he didn't know Lord Tywin, who refused to even parley until Sir Dennis released the king and surrendered. The royal army surrounded the city, and the royal navy blockaded it. Sir Dennis had clearly not anticipated such obstinacy, nor that the king's hand would be in no rush to save the maddening king, when, as Lord Tywin himself pointed out, the realm had a better option in the king's much more stable son, Prince Rhaegar. After 6 months, Lord Tywin's patience was at an end. Or at least, none could claim he acted recklessly if he now stormed the city and Sir Dennis killed the king. But the dutiful and honorable Sir Barristan the Bold volunteered to infiltrate the city and rescue his king single-handedly, as befit his Kingsguard oath. Tywin couldn't refuse such valor, publicly, and so begrudged Sir Barristan one night. Then he would storm the city and put every man, woman, and child to the sword. With only his hands, Sir Barristan climbed the city walls in the dark of night and snuck through the city disguised as a beggar, evading patrols and suspicious townspeople. When he reached the walls of the city keep, the Dun Fort, he scaled those by hand as well, even dispatching the wall guard before he could sound an alarm. With incredible bravery and luck, Sir Barristan made his way to the dungeons and freed his king. Then Sir Barristan's luck ran out. A cry went up through the castle. Someone had discovered the king was gone. With horns and trumpets blaring an alarm, Sir Barristan cut their way to the stables, avenging his slain Kingsguard brother, but taking an arrow to his chest. Slipping through the castle gate just as it closed, the wounded Sir Barristan and Aerys rode through the roused town, racing for the city walls and beyond it the safety of the royal army. Lord Tywin's archers raced forward to clear the walls of defenders, and Sir Barristan the Bold earned immortality by delivering King Aerys to the waiting, if not welcoming, arms of his hand. Without his hostage, Sir Dennis surrendered and begged mercy from the same king he'd imprisoned. Most men would have had none. Aerys had less. He commanded Sir Dennis to be executed along with any man, woman, or child who bore his family name, and anyone who once had. As for Sir Dennis's foreign wife, who had urged his defiance, Aerys commanded that her tongue and womanly parts be torn out, and she be burned alive. It was his first time passing such a sentence. It must have given him a taste for it. For the king rescued from Duskendale was not the same king who'd entered it. Many men would crack after 6 months in a dark cell, being mocked, prodded, and tweaked. Aerys had arrived cracked. Now he was shattered. For years he would refuse to leave the Red Keep, encouraged no doubt by his worried advisors, since he also refused to allow any blades near his person, even to shave his beard, cut his hair, and trim his nails. He began to see enemies in every shadow, who vanished only when the fires burned.
It should not be hard to recruit lords into a war against an enemy known as the Mad King. We can even understand the lords who chose to honor their oaths and fight for him. But the Krakens of House Greyjoy set out Robert's rebellion on pike with their tentacles up their arse.
My father Quellen was old, and sitting is what old people do best. Well, second best. He would have sat out the whole war, if not for my brother and me. We convinced him that nobody would fear the walls of the sea if we curled up by our fires while others feasted on the spoils of the Mad King. So the old man creaked into his rusty armor and set sail for the Reach, only to be routed by Tyrell longboats. When my father sadly fell in battle, my older brother Balon beat a tactical retreat to his own inheritance as the new lord of the Iron Islands.
I'd rather die in the Reach than live on the Iron Islands.
The roses are prettier to pluck. But my brother was getting old and felt that longing to sit. And the sea stone chair was as good a place as any. Within a few years, he realized that sitting is only fun if everyone else has to stand. He had the priest reforge. No, that's not right. They picked up sticks on the beach, wove them into a new ancient driftwood crown, and declared Balon the king of the Iron Islands. Unfortunately for my brother, the other king in Westeros, Robert Baratheon, was famously bad at sharing, and his father by law and warden of the West, Tywin Lannister, had a mighty fleet at Lannisport within striking distance of the Iron Islands.
Yes, you were very clever, and how brave, burning our ships at anchor in the night.
They would have burned the same in daylight. Iron's a lazy beast. You didn't rouse until long after I set fire to your proud mane. I planned it all, you know. My first torch took your father's flagship. If it makes you feel better, we didn't loot it. Out of respect. And time.
I don't think I ever saw Robert happier than the day he heard about the Greyjoy Rebellion. He'd been king for a handful of years, and many handfuls of other things. And it was clear to him and everyone else how ill-suited he was to rule. But battle he could do. Unfortunately, by the time we raised our army, we seemed to be winning the war. Balon's eldest son, your nephew, died trying to storm Seaguard, and his men were thrown back into the arms of their drowned god. If we wanted battle, we'd have to hurry north before the Ironborn put down their own rebellion.
And we would have, if I've had my way. Rebelling was a stupid idea.
Never stopped your people before.
Before Balin put those sticks on his head, I told him that if he wanted to rule the Iron Islands, all he had to do was give King Robert a tour of them. Why waste our forces fighting a war we couldn't win for a place our enemy wouldn't want? With the Iron Fleet, we could reef not just Westeros, but the rich lands beyond the Sunset Sea. But my brother was too attached to that sea stone chair. He commanded me to sail the Iron Fleet against Robert's navy before we could ferry his army to Pike.
A navy commanded by Robert's younger brother, Stannis, most known for sitting in a besieged castle eating dogs and horses. Remind me, how did you fare against a man who'd never commanded ships in battle?
Nearly too well.
Stannis smashed your Iron Fleet at Fair Isle.
After I sailed it into a strait, where our numbers and the size of our ships would work against us. It took some doing to convince my men to rush into such an obvious trap. Stannis was not a subtle man.
You would rather claim treason than defeat.
Victory would have only delayed it. We couldn't hold off Robert's forces forever, but we could waste enough Ironborn that we wouldn't even fill our own islands after the war. I made sure the silence escaped. That was enough for me. That, and watching your army smash my brother's castle soon afterwards.
Why didn't you just abandon him after Fair Isle? Why risk your precious life fighting for him at Pike?
I wanted to kill the best knights in Westeros.
You failed.
So did you. I expected pursuit when I fled Pike on the silence. But I suppose you were too busy not punishing my brother to not punish the man who burned your father's fleet. And now, I'm back.
You were back. But what is the King of the Iron Islands when he's off the Iron Islands?
I'll never see those shit-stained rocks again. But I'm getting old, and I find myself wanting to sit down, as my father and brother did in their time. They just chose the wrong chair.
For thousands of years, when my people looked south, they saw only a wall of ice where lonely crows perched. The Kneelers had stolen our horizon, when our tools shattered against frozen rock, or our boats capsized in rough seas, or bears and shadow cats snatched our game. We cursed the soft men of the green lands beyond the wall. We cursed, and we envied. Huddled around our fires, we told tales of how the Southerners lived, how their stone houses touched the clouds and their bellies touched the ground, how their women fainted at the sight of blood and wouldn't knife a man even when he slept, how they wouldn't miss a few swords or rings or daughters. But now we've seen the real South, and we have to admit, we're disappointed. Southerners live life bent over, in the fields, in courts, in bed. They drink too little beer and they eat too many plants. In the North, a man's worth is in his hands and his stories, not his fancy name and fancy talk. With good steel, a man can hunt, kill, and live. What can a man do with gold, except shine? But what should I expect from a people who all want to sit on the iron chair? A waste of good metal. You can make better seats, I've used them. How am I supposed to get comfortable on a bunch of swords? Ah, now I see why all your queens are fighting over it. Maybe your southern asses are soft enough to take it, but give me a proper seat any day. Or a proper southern ass. As long as it isn't in the south. From what I hear, King's Landing is even hotter and madder than Winterfell. Full of oath breakers, rich shits, and tiny women. They'll kneel to anyone with an army, or gold, or special blood. Nobody can tell me if it's more red, or less red, or what. Maybe it's purple. If the Dragon Queen wants a bunch of kneelers to be stomping along after her, she can have them. But my people have had enough. The dead are gone from the north, but the south is full of them. You just can't tell the difference.